The chamber lights dimmed as the relic drift appeared on the forward display. 12 officers stood in a crescent around the projection, their lacquered armor reflecting the cold blue silhouette of the Terran arc. The flagship's command spire shuddered lightly as the power grid rerouted toward the sterilization array. High Admiral Vekar folded forearms behind his back and allowed a thin ripple of amusement to pass through the bridge. "Primitive processing stock," he said. Voice, smooth as tempered crystal. "A species unable to survive its own century. Their ark arrives here, like debris seeking an owner." Laughter rolled across the spire. A trio of junior tacticians pushed magnified scans forward, cryopods stacked by the tens of thousands, hull plating scoured by 90,000 years of drift, energy signatures near zero. The officers nodded, satisfied. Nothing inside moved, nothing responded. But the ark did not tumble. It held a precise alignment toward the Council fleet despite no visible thrust. That earned only curiosity, nothing more. "Position the sterilization beam," Vekar ordered. "One pulse, clean, efficient, no need for ceremony." The navigator flashed the countdown. Beam charge, 38 TW, distance, 11,200 kilometers. Time to discharge, 90 seconds. A faint hum rose through the deck as capacitors locked. The flagship's observers streamed the operation live to 10,000 worlds. The narrative was simple. Eliminate the relics, remind the frontier of Council strength. "They slept for 90 millennia, a minister murmured. "Let us finish the cycle." A statistic flickered on a side panel. Cryo-life signatures, 67 confirmed. Vekar's eyes narrowed with distaste. "Barely worth cataloguing. Prepare extraction teams for residue analysis. We need the genetic templates." Intact. Punchline. They never imagined the Ark was listening. The projection sharpened as the Ark's forward plating caught a stray reflection from the flagship. The surface looked inert until spectral analysis returned a single anomaly. A harmonic pulse, almost too faint to classify, echoed in a pattern repeating every 0.7 seconds. "Gravitic noise?" a sensor chief asked. "Cosmic background," another dismissed. No one investigated further. At T-minus 40 seconds, the Ark rotated an exact 0.03 degrees. Too small for alarm, too precise for drift. The bridge dismissed it before it registered. "Proceed," Vekar said. A deep tremor ran along the beam conduit as the charge approached threshold. Capacitors neared full saturation. Technicians steadied themselves as containment fields brightened. To a harsh white, punchline, they believed the relics could not refuse. T-minus 12 seconds. Energy curve stable, target lock fixed. Across the bridge, a quiet tension formed, the anticipatory stillness before a display of absolute power. The Council prided itself on such moments. Order, precision, control. But the Ark's alignment held with unnatural steadiness. No rotation drift, no thermal bleed, no decay. It faced them as if by intention. "Final lock," the navigator confirmed. Vekar lifted one hand. "Discharge on my mark." The Ark's pulse flickered again. 0.7 seconds. Apart, stronger, coherent, not noise, a pattern. A response. A single line scrolled across the flagship's linguistic parser, auto-translated before anyone could intervene. "Your beam is acknowledged." Vekar's expression froze. The countdown hit 0. The sterilization array surged, and the ancient ship waited in absolute silence, as if inviting the blow that would begin the next movement. The first command was spoken like a courtesy. "Ark vessel, respond." Only the quiet of the void answered. The Council docking carrier drifted alongside the Terran hull, matching its 11,200-kilometer vector with cautious precision. No thrust signatures, no power grids online, no life systems. Awake. Everything suggested a derelict, yet the Ark held perfect orientation, no drift variance, no roll. Too still, too deliberate. "Transmit the docking tether," the officer ordered. Pulses rippled across the void in a clean arc of blue light, wrapping the Ark in a coded handshake used by every Council species. The reply should have been automatic, impassive acceptance, even from dead hardware. But the Ark remained silent. A second attempt fired. Sharper, more invasive. Another silence. Inside the council bridge, unease wove through the ranks. Dead ships did not refuse commands. Dead systems did not reject standard protocols. Run invasive override, the docking chief said. A 29-digit sequence launched toward the Ark, an order no vessel was designed to ignore. Yet as it reached the hull, the command degraded into static as if swallowed by an unseen field. Punchline? Nothing answers like that unless it means to. The Ark stirred. Not with engines or weapons, but with a faint internal resonance. 0.7-second pulses, rising in cadence. The same anomaly the flagship dismissed earlier now rang through every sensor like a heartbeat preparing to wake. Onboard monitors detected a shift. Cryolife signatures 67 active, thermal emission +002K, neural synchronization climbing. Impossible, a tactician whispered. Cryo doesn't react that fast. But the rising cadence continued, and then, deeper in the Ark, lights flickered in perfect sequence. One row, then the next, as if consciousness traveled through the vessel like a single decision. Unfolding, the council tried again. Terran vessel, identify. The Ark finally answered with movement so subtle it looked like drifting shadow. Its hull rotated exactly 0.11 degrees, an angle that placed its forward array toward the command carrier. Not hostile, not aggressive, simply intentional. A translation packet emerged, compressed into a single line. Docking denied. Static followed. Comm controlled. Final. The council bridge fell silent. The phrase was ancient, part of pre-collapse Terran logs. It belonged to a species no one had seen in 90,000 years. Request backup, the Admiral snapped. 12-sector relay, highest priority. The signal shot outward like a flare. 12 sectors lit on tactical maps as relay points rerouted bandwidth. Worlds paused mid-broadcast. Fleets shifted formation. Every node received the same message. An arc of humanity existed, awake, intentional. Before the Council could respond, the Ark transmitted a second line, this time across the full network, not toward the flagship. Its bandwidth efficiency was startling, 0 distortion, 0 delay. We refuse processing. Stand down. Across those 12 sectors, the message appeared on every encrypted relay. Ministers stared in disbelief. Analysts froze mid-calculation. For a species believed extinct, the tone was calm, as if delivered by a hand that never trembled. Punch. Line. Extinction does not speak with clarity. Inside the Ark, the 67 awakened humans remained perfectly still in their pods, eyes open, unblinking, breathing slow and synchronized. They did not thrash. They did not gasp awake. They simply existed, aligned to a purpose only they understood. Sensors registered no emotional spikes, no panic markers, only disciplined coherence sliding into place like a formation assembling around an unseen center. The Council attempted one last command. Terran vessel, relinquish control and prepare for boarding. The reply came without hesitation. Command structure acknowledged. Boarding denied. The Ark's orientation stabilized. Again, more exact than before. Its resonance pulses softened to a controlled rhythm, signaling readiness rather than fear. The Council fleet drifted around it with growing apprehension, waiting for a response that would never resemble submission. And as the final relay confirmed, the Terran refusal across all 12 sectors, the flagship crew understood a truth that arrived too late. The silence had never been absence. It had been intention, the charge built like a rising star inside the Council flagship. Every conduit, every capacitor, every containment coil pulsed with tightening light as the 38 terawatt lance neared firing threshold. On the forward viewport, the Terran Ark floated in calm alignment. No shields raised, no countermeasures armed, no evasive vector. Begin discharge cycle, Vekar ordered. His voice carried the certainty of a verdict already written. The bridge steadied for the impact echo that always followed a full-power lance. T-minus 10 seconds. Energy saturation, 99.7%. Target lock. Absolute. No one considered failure. Not with his weapon, not against a relic. 3, the navigator said. 2! The lance fired. A column of white gold energy tore through the void, bridging 11,200 kilometers in under a heartbeat. Instruments flared, armor groaned. The beam hit the Terran arc with the force of a collapsing mountain. Clean, total, overwhelming. Then it vanished, not scattered, not reflected, not deflected. Vanished. The arc's hull brightened briefly as if it had inhaled the blow. The beam dissolved into a thin ripple across its surface. One pass, no bleed. Shield drift, 0.04%. Punchline. A relic should not erase a star-class weapon. Silence wrapped the bridge. Officers stared at their screens waiting for secondary readings, thermal bloom, structural failure, anything. But the arc remained unmarked. Not a scorch, not a fracture. It drifted in perfect posture, steady as a blade held motionless. "Recalculate drift," Vekar demanded. "Already confirmed," the tactician replied. 0.04%, no rise." "Impossible," the arc responded. A harmonic pulse spread outward, controlled, measured, identical to the earlier pattern. But now it carried structure, intent, a translation. Packet struck the flagship's parser. Energy received, no damage, the message displayed in unadorned clarity. No boasting, no threat, only fact. "That's not a shield," a physicist whispered. It's absorption. Absorption at that scale violates everything," another finished. Punchline. They didn't block the beam, they accepted it. Across external monitors, a thin, visual distortion shimmered around the arc, like gravity folding along a membrane. The ripple contracted inward until the hull returned to stillness. The Council fired again, this time at 40% power, then 60%. Then 80%. Each burst dissolved before impact, swallowed into the same invisible field. Shield drift rose from 0.004% to 0.0041%, then stabilized. "Thermal analysis?" Vekar asked. The answer came hollow. "No increase detectable. It's not storing heat. It's nullifying transfer." The Admiral's composure cracked by a fraction. "Prepare torpedo barrage." Before the order completed, the arc emitted a single uninterrupted broadcast across the 12 sectors still listening. "We do not escalate. Do not fire again." Calm, not emotional, not desperate. A directive delivered by a species long past the need for fear. The Council fleet hesitated. Not because they obeyed, because they didn't understand how the arc had survived. No doctrine prepared them for a weapon failing without explanation. "Target is technologically incompatible," a strategist muttered. "We need a new model." But the arc shifted its orientation again, another deliberate 0.111 degrees, as if acknowledging the barrage and setting a boundary. A final line arrived on the flagship's display. "Your beam was measured. We remain." The bridge felt smaller, colder, as if the void itself had stepped closer. Officers exchanged looks they had no language for. The Terrans had spoken without hostility, without urgency, without fear. And the Council Admirals understood, with startled clarity, that the galaxy's assumptions had already failed. The arc waited, patient and unshaken. The next move, inevitably, was theirs. The arc's hull dimmed once, as if drawing breath, and the void shifted around it. No warning lights, no power spike, no weapon charge. Only a subtle tightening of space, like a bowstring pulled back without a sound. Council officers leaned forward, searching for familiar signatures, thruster ignition, plasma venting, magnetic wake. But nothing appeared. The arc remained still. Perfectly still, until it wasn't. A burst of motion cracked across every sensor at once. Velocity, 0, 9,400 ms in 4 seconds. Structural stress, negligible. Trajectory, direct intercept. It's moving. It's moving." The navigator choked out, recalculations spilling across his console. "Acceleration curve impossible. Nothing that size can—" The arc surged again. Speed, 18,600 memories at 7 seconds. Council formations faltered. Ships scattered wide, adjusting in frantic bursts, but the arc cut through their alignment like a blade through mist. The flagship's collision alarms shrieked across the bridge. "Hold formation!" Vekar barked, but his order was drowned under the rising panic as escorts scrambled to avoid impact. Punchline, You cannot intercept what refuses inertia. At 11 seconds, the arc stabilized at 28,000 ms. Not drifting, not coasting. Holding that velocity with absolute precision, vector perfect, angle locked, every adjustment measured to the third decimal. Council ships attempted predictive targeting, but their algorithms sputtered. The arc obeyed no known propulsion law. No flame, no plume, no distortion. Only motion carved from mathematics older than any empire present. The first collision avoidance wave collapsed. A spearhead of 43 Council frigates tried to pivot into a containment arc, but the arc slid between them with 0.3 meters of clearance, too close to be accidental, too clean to be luck. "Evasive pattern, Delta!" a commander shouted over comms. "Negative!" another shouted. "It's adapting faster than we can—" And then the real shift began. From the arc's underside, 67 smaller signatures detached, war forms the size of cutters, shaped like angular. Shards of armored night. They formed instantly, no signaling, no visible thrust. Their grid locked into an expanding lattice, each craft matching the arc's velocity within milliseconds. Grid spacing, 112 meters. Formation error, 0.0%. "Those aren't drones," a tactician whispered. "They're piloted." The formation tilted as one, rotating into a vector that sliced straight toward the densest concentration of Council ships. Punchline: formation. Collapse begins at the first breath of intent. The Council's outer ring broke under the pressure. 2 cruisers veered off course to avoid collision and clipped their own escorts. No fatalities, only twisted hulls drifting into darkness. But the humiliation was immediate. The Terran formation did not capitalize. It didn't fire. It didn't ram. It simply moved through the chaos it created, forcing the fleet to fold upon itself like a collapsing diagram. "Why aren't they attacking?" the Admiral hissed. "Because the humans didn't need to." Their control of the battle space was already absolute. The 67 warforms tightened around the arc, settling into a close-range contact envelope that left the Council with no tactical map that made sense. Every predictive model failed. Every intercept point dissolved. The Terrans held their acceleration, held their silence, held a posture that suggested invitation rather than war. A single line transmitted at low power, reaching every ship that still maintained orientation. "Keep distance. We do not harm unless forced, not a threat, a boundary." The Council fleet, scattered and breathless, drifted in disordered rings around the formation, and the Terrans waited, motionless at 28,000 ms, perfectly aligned, as if marking the spot where the next decision must be made. The Terran formation tightened as if an unseen hand closed around it. 67 warforms locked into a spearhead with such precision that Council targeting grids refused to render the angles. Each ship held perfectly still at $28,000 ms, waiting, not tense, not uncertain, simply choosing the moment. The Council chose first. A wall of 2,800 warships surged forward, thrusters blazing, weapons blooming in incandescent arcs across the dark. The flagship broadcast one last command across the channel. "Engage and overwhelm!" The Terrans answered with motion. The spearhead unfolded. Rail batteries rotated outward in synchronized quarters. Launch arrays slid open like metal eyelids. No alarms, no shouted orders. Only a shift as smooth as breath. The first volley struck before the Council registered the firing signature. Railgun rounds, 5,400. Travel time, 0.8 seconds. Impact pattern, exact. 43 cruisers vanished on contact. Hulls punctured cleanly, their cores vented in silent eruptions of white fire. The debris trailed behind them in narrow spirals, drawn into irradiated ribbons by velocity. Punchline: precision does not roar. It ends. More railfire followed. The Terrans didn't carpet the field. They threaded it. Every shot was a line of intent. No wasted metal. No errant drift. Each round mapped to a weakness the Council never considered a weakness. In 22 seconds, 600 warships were gone. In 41 seconds, the count reached 100. The Council attempted to scatter, but the arc tilted its vector, and the 67 warforms mirrored, the shift with computer-perfect symmetry. A second phase began, nuclear spears, slender and near-invisible until detonation. Yield, 4.2 kilotons. Radius, micro-contained. Purpose, disable without annihilation. Spears threaded through shielding, like needles slipping into fabric. When they detonated, they did not create fireballs, they created collapse. Gravity peeled open hulls, reactors shut down in waves. Entire ships folded like crushed latticework, their systems dead before their crews understood what hit them. Within 3 minutes, the Terrans had reduced 2,800 ships from a fleet to statistics. Punchline: this is what inevitability looks like. Through it all, the Terrans transmitted no victory calls, no threats, no celebration. Every strike was measured: destroy when required, disable when possible. Escape pods drifted outward in gentle arcs, unscorched, untouched. Council officers stared in numb disbelief as casualty projections arrived. Fatalities, minimal. Survivors, thousands. Ships destroyed, 1,900. Ships disabled but intact, 900. They're sparing us? A strategist whispered. Voice cracking, the Ark answered with a single broadcast, calm and absolute. We neutralize weapons. We do not kill crews. Retrieve your people. The message resonated across the broken armada. Even in ruin, the Terrans held their principle like an iron law. Their dominance served restraint, not wrath. Amid drifting wreckage, Terran war forms slowed to a steady pattern, opening clear corridors toward escape pods and wounded ships. A gesture, not mercy alone, but order. The Council fleet, shattered and humiliated, could do nothing but obey. Recovery vessels moved forward, lights dim against the Terran silhouette. The humans offered no interference, no pursuit, only space to gather the living. And above the silent wreckage, the Ark held its position, unchanged, unhurried, waiting for the next step the Council must take, with the certainty of a force that no longer feared anything in this. The debris field drifted in slow arcs, glowing faintly where shattered reactors vented their last breath. Council recovery vessels moved cautiously among the wrecks, retrieving escape pods and stabilizing disabled cruisers. The Terran Ark did not move. Its 67 warforms hovered around it like a quiet constellation, present, disciplined, watching. Then the Ark released something other than weapons. A data pulse, silent, compressed, unstoppable. It washed across the Council networks in less than a second, slipping past every firewall with the ease of a practiced hand, tracing a familiar path. Screens across the flagship flickered, maps shifted, new archives unfolded line by line. "What is this?" a minister demanded. "A ledger," the analyst whispered, eyes widening. "A record. From the Ark itself." The first file opened. Timeline, 90,000 years. Status, active. Punchline, extinction leaves no ledger. Images and notations filled the displays, structured in a way human historians once used. No arrogance, no threat, just clarity, hidden colonies. It marked in faint blue across long-forgotten regions. 11,000 survivors, scattered at the time of disappearance. Signals purposely silenced, trails erased, a deliberate quieting of their own light. "Why hide?" an officer murmured. The answer arrived in the next file. Projected threat vectors, 17. Confirmed existential threats, 3. Most recent, outer rim, annihilation wave. The humans had not vanished by accident. They had stepped into shadow to survive what the galaxy never recognized. Their Ark was not an escape. It was the center of a strategy spanning 90 millennia. More data unfolded. Doctrines. Ethics, not war plans, principles. Rescue before wrath. Disarm before destruction. No killing of prisoners. Stabilize civilians as priority. That is impossible, Vekar muttered. No species maintains doctrine for that long. The Ark disagreed with a new transmission. Principles are not eras. They are choices. The message displayed in every language present, Council Standard, Valkreth Harmonic, Crystalline Glyph Set, and a dozen others. The Terrans were not speaking for themselves alone. They had learned every tongue they could find. Punchline, preparation is a form of mercy. The next wave of files showed something stranger, intercepted signals from Council skirmishes centuries old. Human shadow fleets had watched them, not intervening. Not attacking, measuring, cataloging which factions protected their civilians and which weaponized them. A map rendered across the main view. 12 sectors highlighted in soft gold, marked worlds where Terran covert teams rescued populations from collapsing empires, quietly, without credit, ensuring survival where politics failed. They saved them, the Admiral said, stunned. They protected strangers for millennia, another corrected. The final document unfolded like a calm hand placed on the table. Casualty protocols. Disable. Evacuate. Return survivors. The Council stared at the earlier battle stats. Ships destroyed. 900. Fatalities minimal. Survivors retrieved. Thousands. The numbers aligned perfectly with the doctrine. The Ark transmitted again. Your wounded will be returned. No one will be harmed. Council crews froze at the tone. There was no superiority, no judgment, only steady assurance, as if the humans had spent 90,000 years practicing restraint for exactly this moment. Then a final message echoed across the fleet, quiet but unshakable. We answer threats with precision. We answer life with protection. The displays dimmed, leaving only the drifting wreckage illuminated by the cold stars, and the Terran formation remained motionless, holding the space not as conquerors but as guardians, waiting for the next necessary decision to reveal itself in the widening silence. The first uprising did not begin with fire. It began with a whisper. One routed through encrypted channels, thought dead, one that every rebel cell across 70 systems recognized instantly. A signal older than their movements, older than their parents' histories. A code, trace that should not have existed. On the Council flagship, alarms chimed as civilian networks across 12 sectors surged with unauthorized traffic. The admirals scrambled to shut them down, but the packets were already past containment. Too coordinated, too silent, too familiar to the oppressed. Rebel channels lit like a constellation rising from shadow. 70 systems. Thousands of suppressed groups. One message. Stand ready. High Admiral Vekar watched in disbelief as resistance enclaves he thought dismantled years ago reappeared with surgical precision, their leaders speaking as if receiving long-awaited confirmation. It made no sense. Rebels were fractured, desperate, unorganized. They did not move like a single body, unless something older bound them. The Terran Ark pulsed with that same 0.7-second resonance, stabilizing into a transmission band no Council encryption could mask. Across hidden bunkers, mining colonies, black market docks, and forgotten moons, rebel leaders paused mid-breath. It's real, one whispered. The old code. Punchline. Hope moves faster than weapons. The Council. Attempted suppression, flooding comms with jammers, but the interference arrived too late. The rebels were no longer whispering, they were aligning. Civilian fleets vanished into dark space. Planetary militias flipped allegiance. Governors fled. Entire systems shut down production as if following orders written generations ago. Inside, the Ark. The change had already begun. Compartments opened, hatches slid aside. Figures stepped into light for the first time in centuries. Terran infiltration teams, 67 specialists, not soldiers but operatives designed for planetary stabilization, emerged, with movements too controlled to be sudden or disoriented. Their synchronization remained flawless. They wore the same dark armor as the warforms, scaled to human frames, each suit marked with an engraved sigil, a vertical line intersected by 3 shorter lines, ancient military shorthand for observe, guide, restore. They had not awakened for war. They had awakened for preparation. Punchline: 6 millennia is long enough to plan a single moment. Fragmented records streamed into Council screens, missions hidden in the margins of history, human operatives embedding within collapsing empires, 6,000 years earlier. Untraceable hands redirecting refugee fleets, quiet interventions preventing extinction events blamed on natural disasters. Impossible, a minister said, shaking. They were myths, but the files were real. Dates, coordinates, population counts, actions taken, minimal, precise, unseen. The Terrans had been guiding fractures toward this point, not controlling rebellion, but ensuring it could survive long enough to matter. Across 70 systems, factions long at odds fell into alignment. Old rivalries dissolved under a unifying thread, the rediscovered Terran doctrine. They had been waiting for a signal they did not remember consciously, only through stories, symbols, and inherited warnings. The Ark transmitted again. Stabilize your worlds. Evacuate your vulnerable. We will not occupy. The message spread faster than any council counter-signal. Civilians cheered, soldiers hesitated. Entire planetary networks reconfigured their allegiance in under 7 minutes. The council watched their reach dissolve like sand slipping through open hands. What they had controlled for centuries, the Terrans shifted in moments, not by force, but by preparation, buried deep in forgotten eras. Vikar stared at the main display, voice hollow. How long? Have they been waiting? The Ark answered without flourish. 6,000 years, no triumph, no mockery, only truth. Across the silent wreckage field, the Terran formation tightened into a protective arc, ensuring the Council could not lash out in desperation. Rebel fleets fell in beside them, not as subordinates, but as allies who had finally met the architects of their endurance. The coalition was no longer quiet, it was inevitable. And from the Ark's interior, more signals prepared to unfold, plans, written in centuries, ready to step into the open at last. The first surrender came before the Terrans fired a single shot. A border patrol of 16 ships powered down engines the moment the Ark's silhouette crossed their horizon. No orders, no debate, just silence and compliance. It did not slow the inevitable. Not when 7,200 Council warships still surged across the sectors, desperate to regain control before the coalition fully aligned. The Terrans moved before the Council fleet could assemble a coherent formation. 67 warforms expanded from the Ark in precise vectors, forming a tri-layered net shaped like an unfolding star. Each craft held its position with zero deviation, their movements reading like a geometry lesson carved into the void. Activation time, 0.3 seconds. Engagement clock, 47 minutes. Punchline. Domination begins when doubt becomes data. The Council's first strike fleet opened fire with a storm of plasma crescents, 7,200 weapon systems igniting in blinding arcs. The Terrans responded with silence. Their hulls shimmered, absorbing lances with the same 0.04% drift recorded earlier. Then they moved. The first wave of Terran fire was not destructive, only disabling. Gravitic spires unfolded from the warforms like crystalline fins, releasing pulses invisible to the eye but brutal to machinery. Pulse width, 0.0002 seconds. Effective radius, 31 km. Impact, full systems collapse. 92 Council destroyers went dark instantly, their reactors slipping into safe shutdown as if someone flicked a switch. Navigation grids froze. Weapons cooled, engines locked, crew survived unhurt, staring into the same terrible realization. They were not being killed. They were being disarmed. Punchline. Mercy can feel like inevitability wearing gentler skin. The second wave struck deeper. Railgun bursts, narrow arcs of tungsten, each round calibrated to cripple without breaching core, shot through enemy lines. Every impact was measured. Engines died. Shields collapsed. Ships drifted like lanterns pushed by invisible currents. The Council attempted countervolley, but predictive algorithms failed. Terran trajectories shifted with micro-adjustments too small for Council sensors to track. The warforms slid between firing lanes with sub-millimeter precision. At the 19-minute mark, disabled, 2,800 ships, destroyed, 0. Fatalities, negligible. The Council panicked. Commanders shouted contradictory orders as their own live feeds populated with surrender flags. Civilian governors begged the admirals to cease fire. Entire planetary defense rings shut down voluntarily once Terran signals reached them. But the Terrans didn't press. They simply continued disabling ships, efficient, calm, unhurried. By 33 minutes, 400 ships floated powerless. By 40 minutes, 6,600. By 47 minutes, the fleet was gone, 7,200 ships neutralized, every crew alive, every vessel intact enough to recover. The final blow was not a weapon. It was a number, a single transmission emitted from the Ark, pulsing through every channel across the sectors. Combat complete. 0 casualties inflicted, all crews recoverable. The message struck harder than any nuclear spear. Council officers stared at their screens in quiet horror. Their entire military force had been erased from relevance without a single death. No empire survives numbers like that. Punchline: a broken fleet cannot claim authority. One by one, systems broadcast their surrender. Governors offered ceasefire, admirals lowered their flags. Civilians transmitted gratitude, fear, confusion, anything to be heard. The Terrans acknowledged each message with the same line: stabilize your worlds. Aid your wounded. We will not occupy. Rebel fleets held formation beside the Ark, no longer insurgents, but recognized partners in a new order. Terran warforms dimmed their weapons and shifted into a containment arc, ensuring stranded crews could be safely retrieved. Dominance had been absolute. Mercy had been deliberate. And across 10,000 suns, the galaxy understood the shape of the power that had returned. The Terrans waited, the battlefield silent, except for drifting hulls and the quiet recalibration of an age about to change. The battlefield softened into stillness long before the fear did. Across the dark expanse, disabled council ships drifted like dim lanterns, their reactors quiet, their weapons sealed by Terran pulses. Rescue corridors opened automatically as the 67 warforms repositioned into a wide shield, guiding escape pods and crippled cruisers towards stabilization zones. The Terrans made no demands. They only made space. A transmission spread across all channels, calm and exact. Recover your wounded. All prisoners will be treated. No crews will be harmed. On the Council flagship, Vakar stood motionless as casualty projections appeared. Fatalities, negligible. Survivors, all accounted for. Medical priority, stabilized by Terran drones. He could not reconcile the numbers. No battle, no defeat of this scale, had ever ended without mass death. Yet as the first rescue vessel approached, a Terran drop hull, it found 30 Council crew inside, alive and perfectly cared for. Temperature controlled, wounds sealed, hydration administered with precision. The lead medic whispered, "They treated our people better than we do." Punchline: mercy rewrites the battlefield before politics can. Terran drones moved from ship to ship, checking life signs, repairing hull breaches just enough to prevent atmosphere loss. They left every vessel intact for Council retrieval, never boarding, never intruding, never pushing advantage. The restraint felt heavier than any weapon. Then the Ark transmitted again, this time with unmistakable authority. Criminal trials will be held. Decisions by consensus, no executions, no disappearances, evidence transparency required. Council officers stiffened. They had expected occupation, conquest, demands. Instead, they received procedure. Cold, structured, incorruptible. A panel of Terran representatives appeared on the flagship's main display. Not soldiers, not commanders. Administrators, calm, focused, their faces unreadable after 90 millennia of engineered discipline. "We propose terms." "Of continuance," one said. "Your governance remains, your systems remain. But oversight is required to prevent further violations." "No annexation," a minister asked, voice strained. "None," the Terran replied. "We correct. We do not rule." Punchline: authority. Earned through restraint lasts longer than authority taken by force. The terms unfolded with mathematical clarity. Independent trials for war crimes. Release of political prisoners across all systems. Prohibition of forced labor and systemic repression. Open humanitarian lanes under Terran protection. Council sovereignty retained, but subject to a non-aggression doctrine verified by Terran monitors. Governors across 12 sectors agreed within minutes. Not from fear, though fear was present, but because the alternative was extinction or chaos. The Terrans offered continuity with accountability. A future, not a collapse. In private channels, rebel factions joined the negotiation. Their leaders appeared side by side with council ministers, former enemies, now bound by a force neither dared to challenge nor hated enough to resist. The coalition expanded from necessity into structure, old wounds replaced by the cold logic of survival. Under Terran oversight, Vakar finally spoke, "And if we refuse?" The Terran administrator did not raise his voice. "You saw our doctrine. We do not kill prisoners. We do not remove governments. We only prevent harm." "Then you control us," Vakar said. "We guide stability," the Terran corrected. "The galaxy has suffered enough cycles of conquest. Continuance requires balance, not domination." Punchline: control was never the goal. Correction was. The flagship's council chamber dimmed as signatures flowed in, planetary leaders, military officers, frontier governors, all accepting the terms of continuance. One by one, the sectors aligned themselves under Terran supervision, not as subjects, but as participants in a framework older and steadier than any living empire. Across the void, the Ark dimmed its resonance pulses, shifting into a monitoring posture. The warforms dispersed gently among the recovery routes, ensuring safe passage for every wounded crew. The political shift had begun, quiet, but irreversible. Terrans did not claim the galaxy. They steadied it, and in the settling calm, something distant stirred, something the next chapter would force into light. The last recovery vessel drifted clear when the shift began, small at first, a tremor in the background noise of deep space. Terran sensors detected it before any council device did. A low-frequency irregularity threading through the void like a distant breath. Atop the Ark, resonance pulses halted. All 67 warforms rotated in absolute unison, their hulls dimming as if listening. The coalition fleets paused, confused by the sudden stillness. Then the reading appeared. Origin, outer rim, distance, 11 light hours. Classification, exterminator lattice, ancient, dormant, now stirring. Punchline, some threats never die. They wait. The Council flagship's analysts went pale as the signal unfolded into recognizable structure. Patterns decades of historians had dismissed as myth, harmonic signatures matching ruins at the galaxy's edge. The same frequency recorded in extinct systems the Council had once labeled natural collapses. "It can't be active," a minister whispered. "Those constructs vanished before our civilizations even formed." The Ark responded before panic. Took root. "Threat vector detected. No immediate risk. Prepare observation protocol. Terran calm carried more weight than any reassurance the Council could offer itself." Yet unease rippled through every vessel. They had just surrendered their military, their authority, their certainty. Now something older, perhaps older than humanity, signaled from the dark. Punchline: correction ends. Vigilance does not. Terran teams moved inside the Ark with renewed purpose. Panels slid open. Long-stored equipment rose from sealed chambers. Liquid metal reconfigured itself into sensor arrays that had not been used in thousands of years. Council. Officers watched the data unfold line by line. Signal periodicity, 4.6 minutes. Power source, artificial. Amplitude growth, 0.02% per cycle. Composition, not organic, not mechanical, something in between. "Is it calling to something?" Vakar asked. The Terran administrator answered with unsettling precision. "It is not calling. It is testing, probing for response patterns." "And what do we do?" The reply held no hesitation. "We observe. We prepare. We do not escalate." The Council expected warships to align into formation again, expected Terrans to ready weapons, expected a new command to crush whatever stirred beyond the frontier. Instead, the Terran formation shifted toward a protective arc, not facing outward but inward, surrounding the coalition fleets like guardians, preparing for a storm they knew intimately. "We are not your shield," the Terran spokesperson clarified, as if reading the Council's fear. "We are your warning." The words struck harder than any weapon fired that day. Punchline: the horizon always holds another question. Across the coalition, rebel leaders and council ministers joined in shared apprehension. Their old conflicts felt suddenly trivial, swallowed by the scale of what might be waking in the dark. The Ark transmitted one more directive, broader than any message yet sent. Stabilize your worlds. Strengthen your alliances. The next movement will not be against each other. Terran warforms turned one by one toward the outer rim, aligning into a silent procession. Not advancing, not retreating, just watching. Still as blades set in a rack, waiting for the hand that might lift them. Council officers stared at the distant coordinate. Nothing visible, nothing audible. Only the faint tremor echoing through, sensors at steady intervals. The sound of something ancient, remembering itself. The coalition fleets held their breath. The Terrans did not. They had known this signal. They had prepared for its return. And as the Ark dimmed its lights and shifted into the posture of a sentinel, the galaxy understood that the age of correction had ended. The age of vigilance had begun.